Beltracchi forgery genius. Imagine a painting. It's a masterpiece of German expressionism, vibrant and raw, pulsing with the energy of a world on the brink of change. Experts gather, their eyes tracing every bold brushstroke, every subtle blend of color. They nod in reverent agreement. It's a lost work, they say, a missing piece from the puzzle of a great artist's career. It's authentic. It's priceless. It sells at a prestigious auction house for nearly 3 million euros. The only problem? The artist, Heinrich Kompendonk, had been dead for decades and had absolutely nothing to do with it. The painting was a complete and utter fabrication, born not in 1914, but in a quiet studio in the south of France in the 21st century. This wasn't just a forgery, it was an act of artistic ventriloquism so perfect, so convincing, it fooled the entire world. And the man holding the brush was Wolfgang Beltracchi, a name that would soon become synonymous with the greatest art scandal of the modern era. To understand the Beltracchi affair, you have to discard everything you think you know about art forgery. We're not talking about a meticulous student painstakingly copying the Mona Lisa. We're not talking about someone faking a signature on a minor drawing. Wolfgang Beltracchi operated on a level of audacity and genius that was frankly unprecedented. He didn't copy existing masterpieces. That, in his eyes, was a fool's errand. A copy can always be compared to the original, its flaws inevitably exposed under scrutiny. Beltracchi's method was infinitely more sophisticated and far more insidious. He targeted the gaps. He looked for the lost works, the paintings mentioned in letters or exhibition catalogs, but whose whereabouts were unknown. And if a gap didn't exist, he would simply invent one. He created entirely new, original works in the signature styles of some of the 20th century's most revered artists. He wasn't just a forger, he was a ghost painter, channeling the spirits of men like Max Ernst, Fernand Léger, André Derain, and Heinrich Kompendonk. He painted the masterpieces they have painted, the works they have painted. His process was a masterclass in obsessive detail. It began not with a brush, but with a book. Beltracchi was a voracious researcher. He would immerse himself in the life of his chosen artist, reading their biographies, their diaries, their private correspondence. He learned about their lovers, their rivalries, their travels, their moments of creative breakthrough, and their periods of despair. He needed to know not just they painted, but how they painted. He needed to understand their psychology, their worldview, their very soul. This deep empathy allowed him to inhabit their artistic persona. When he decided to create a lost Max Ernst from his surrealist period, he would think like Ernst, dream like Ernst, and approach the canvas with the same revolutionary fervor. This psychological deep dive was the foundation of his deception. Then came the materials. This is where Beltracchi's meticulousness bordered on the fanatical. He knew that any modern material would be an instant giveaway under forensic analysis. So he became a scavenger, a historian of artistic supplies. He would travel to flea markets across Europe, hunting for period-correct canvases and wooden stretchers. He'd look for worthless old paintings from the correct era, scrape off the original paint, and use the aged canvas as his base. This gave his forgeries an authentic, built-in history right from the start. But the canvas was only the beginning. The pigments were his true obsession. He refused to use modern, pre-mixed tubes of paint. Instead, he became an amateur chemist, researching the exact formulas used by artists in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. He bought old, obscure minerals, ground them down by hand, and mixed them with his own binding agents, like oil and egg, just as the masters would have done. He even collected old dust from his studio, a fine layer of authentic grime, and would sprinkle it on the back of his finished canvases to complete the illusion of age and neglect. Every single element, from the frame to the nails holding it together, had to be perfect, had to be anachronism-free. He was building a time machine, one brushstroke at a time. This fanatical devotion to material authenticity is what elevated his forgeries from mere imitations to objects that could withstand the intense scrutiny of experts. They weren't just looking at a picture, they were holding a historical artifact, and every fiber of it screamed authenticity. This set the stage for one of the most elaborate and successful cons the art world has ever seen, a con that would require more than just a perfect painting. It would require a perfect story. Block 2. Art market exposed. A perfect forgery is worthless without a perfect story. A masterpiece doesn't just appear out of thin air. It needs a history, a chain of ownership that traces its journey through time. This is called provenance, and it is the bedrock of the art market. Wolfgang Beltracchi knew this better than anyone. His artistic skill was only half of the equation. The other half was a brilliant, elaborate, and completely fabricated narrative that was as masterfully constructed as any of his paintings. He and his wife Helene concocted the legend of the Léger's collection. The story went that Helene's grandfather, Werner Jägers, was a wealthy German industrialist who, in the 1920s and 30s, had been a secret but prolific collector of modern art. He had supposedly hidden his collection away to protect it from the Nazis, and it had only been rediscovered by his descendants decades later. It was the kind of story the art world dreams of, a hidden treasure trove of lost masterpieces, untouched by time, emerging from the shadows of history. To sell this fiction, Beltracchi employed a stroke of theatrical genius. He didn't just write down the story, he created photographic proof. He had his wife, Helene, dress up in her grandmother's period clothing. She would pose in front of his freshly painted forgeries, which were hung on the wall of an old ancestral-looking home. Beltracchi, using an old camera and period-correct film, would snap these carefully staged photographs. The resulting images looked exactly like authentic family photos from the pre-war era, seemingly documenting the collection in its original setting. These photos were the key. They were the unimpeachable evidence that bypassed doubt and went straight to the heart of what collectors and experts wanted to believe. With these photos in hand, the Beltracchis began to carefully introduce their heirlooms to the market. Their timing was impeccable. They were feeding directly into the art market's insatiable hunger for novelty. The established canon of modern art is relatively small, and most major works are already in museums or major private collections. The discovery of a new Max Ernst or a lost Fernand Léger is a seismic event, a chance for a collector to own a unique piece of history and for an auction house to make headlines. This fervent desire for the undiscovered created a climate of confirmation bias. Experts affirmed the paintings to be real. A new addition to an artist's catalogue raisonné is a major feather in an authenticator's cap. Beltracchi's works were not just convincing, they were also beautiful and artistically significant, filling plausible gaps in the artists' careers. They were exactly the kinds of paintings that have existed, and the Jägers collection provided the perfect romantic backstory. Prestigious auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's, along with renowned galleries and experts, fell hook, line, and sinker. The forgeries began to sell for staggering sums. The actor Steve Martin unknowingly bought a fake Campendonk for over $850,000. A French media mogul paid millions for a Max Ernst. The Beltracchis were living a life of luxury, their deception funding a lavish lifestyle of yachts and villas. For years, the scheme was flawless. But, as the saying goes, pride comes before a fall. Beltracchi became more audacious, his forgeries more ambitious. And then, in 2006, he made one tiny, microscopic mistake. It happened with a painting titled Supposedly Created by Heinrich Campendonk in 1914. Beltracchi, as always, was meticulous with his pigments. He knew he couldn't use modern titanium white, a pigment that wasn't commercially available in 1914. So he concocted his own white paint, using zinc as a base to mimic the historical formula. However, he made a fatal error. The label on his tube of zinc white failed to mention that it contained a small amount of titanium dioxide as a whitener. The client who purchased the painting for €2.88 million sent it for scientific analysis. The sample was examined by Dr. Nicholas Eastoff, a renowned pigment analyst. Under the microscope, everything looked right: the canvas, the binders, the other colors. But the white pigment told a different story. The analysis revealed the presence of a specific type of titanium white, a form that simply did not exist in any artist's palette in 1914. It was a chemical impossibility. That single anachronistic molecule was the loose thread that would unravel the entire multi-million-dollar tapestry of lies. The greatest forger of the modern age wasn't brought down by an art historian's discerning eye, but by the cold, hard certainty of a chemistry lab. The art world was about to face a reckoning. Forgery market. Impact. The discovery of titanium white in a 1914 painting was more than just a red flag. It was a detonation. The moment that scientific report landed, the entire Jaggers collection narrative imploded. If Yenko was a fake, what about the dozens of other masterpieces that had emerged from this mythical collection? A frantic wave of re-examination began. Paintings that had been celebrated on the covers of auction catalogs, lauded by critics, and purchased for millions by sophisticated collectors were suddenly pulled from gallery walls and sent to laboratories. One by one, the results came back, each a nail in the coffin of Beltracchi's empire. The Max Ernsts, the Fernand Légers, the André Durands, all revealed to contain modern pigments or materials. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. It wasn't just one or two fakes. It was an entire phantom collection, a ghost museum that had been successfully laundered into the highest echelons of the art market. The financial repercussions were catastrophic. Collectors who believed they owned a piece of art history worth millions were now in possession of canvases that were, in monetary terms, completely worthless. The total value of the forgery sold is estimated to be anywhere from $20 million to well over $50 million, though the true figure may never be known. Lawsuits erupted as furious buyers sued the auction houses and galleries that had sold them the fakes. These institutions, in turn, had to confront their own colossal failures of due diligence, leading to massive insurance claims and buybacks. But the damage went far beyond money. The scandal inflicted a deep and lasting wound on something far more fragile: trust. The reputations of the world's leading art experts, authenticators, and connoisseurs were left in tatters. These were the gatekeepers, the high priests of the art world, whose eye was supposed to be infallible. Yet they had not only been fooled, they had enthusiastically endorsed Beltracchi's creations, writing glowing provenances and staking their professional credibility on the authenticity of his work. The crisis of trust rippled through the entire industry. If these experts could be so completely deceived, who could be trusted? The Beltracchi affair served as a brutal wake-up call, forcing a fundamental and long-overdue shift in how the art world verifies authenticity. The romantic notion of the lone connoisseur making a definitive judgment based on instinct and a trained eye was exposed as dangerously inadequate. The scandal catalyzed the widespread integration of rigorous scientific analysis into the authentication process. It was no longer enough for a painting to write. It had to write down to the molecular level. Techniques that were once secondary became standard practice. pigment analysis using gas chromatography, infrared reflectography to see underdrawings, X-ray fluorescence to identify the elemental composition of materials, and even carbon-14 dating for canvases and wood panels became essential tools. The art gallery, in many ways, had to become a forensic laboratory. This new paradigm, a mandatory partnership between art history and hard science, is perhaps Beltracchi's most significant and unintended legacy. He exposed a systemic vulnerability, and the market, in response, was forced to build a much stronger immune system. Ultimately, the scandal forces us to ask profound questions about the nature of art and value. Wolfgang Beltracchi, who was sentenced to 6 years in prison, has always maintained that he was not a common criminal, but a superior artist. And in a strange way, he has a point. His paintings were not clumsy copies, they were original compositions of exceptional skill, so brilliant that they brought immense joy to viewers and were deemed masterpieces by the very people who define what a masterpiece is. Does the discovery of their true origin negate that beauty? Is the value of a work of art derived solely from the signature on the canvas or from its intrinsic aesthetic power? Beltracchi didn't just exploit the art market's greed, he exploited its soul, its deep-seated desire for beauty, narrative, and the myth of the lost genius. He held up a mirror, and in its reflection, the art world saw its own vanities, its insecurities, and the often unspoken truth that the line between a priceless masterpiece and a worthless fake can sometimes be as thin as a single, misplaced molecule of paint.